he asked me to.
Hi, I'm Brennan H. I'm Greg Goodson.
And I'm Pavan D.
So now that we looked at mathematics in more of a historical context, we're going to shift into the digital era. So our project is on anti-aliasing of images, which is a technique that you can see here in the bottom, the staircase effect, and can be compared to the alias side on the top. So first we want to look at what makes an image an image. So our definition was simply a matrix of pixels. As you can see behind me, pixels are all square in shape, and they can be depicted in a variety of colors. The issue with pixels is that when put together to form shapes, as with the title page, they create some of the staircase effect that is blocky and does not look good. This is where our technique of anti-aliasing comes into play. This is used to smooth out the jagged edges on the planes and therefore make the photos look better.
Yes, so to fully understand images, we have to understand the two basic types that all images will fall into. The first are called bitmap images. These are the ones that Greg was talking about earlier when he talked about matrices and pixels. These images are the ones that we use all the time, JPEGs and PNGs, and anytime we convert data of any kind to a picture with the camera, we're creating a bitmap image. The problem, obviously, with bitmap image is that first, it's finite in space, and second, it's made up of these square pixels. And so for these reasons, we can never truly create an entirely smooth curve, but simply continuously get approximations. Now, in contrast to bitmap image, there's another type called the vector image. The vector image is actually defined mathematically, and for this reason, if we continue to zoom in and in on the image, because we have this mathematical definition, we'll always be able to see the smooth curve. Before us. So our project's motivation is essentially to take this technique of bitmap images and apply it to vector images, because vector images can't be produced from data in the same way that bitmap images have. We have to create them artificially through mathematical methods, and the ubiquity of bitmap images clearly presents the challenge to apply this the superiority of vector images. It's also necessary to note that for the purpose of the presentation, pixels that have a 1 are going to represent pixels that have been turned on. They're in the on state, while the ones that have a 0 are going to be in the off position. So to try to approximate this smooth curve with the bitmap image, we tried a series of algorithms. The first one's called the simple algorithm, and simply enough, if the image passes through the pixel, it touches it in any fashion, that pixel is going to be turned on. As you can see, we have a pixel turned on, like I said, with a 1 and highlighted black. While if the image does not pass through the pixel, it remains in the opposition and so we took this to a 10 by 10 grid. We brought in a circle, and you see that every pixel which touches the circle is turned on, has a 1. And so applying the algorithm, we have this result on the right here. We get a very blocky circle. I'm not even sure, if I didn't show you the image on the left, you would conclude that we started with a circle, and I think it was a diamond of some kind. And so for this reason, we tried to make our next algorithm a lot more selective in order to cut down this blockness.
Because our simple algorithm was a little too lenient when selecting which pixels to turn on, we decided to make it a little bit more complicated, and we devised this thing called the cross algorithm. And the way it works is, instead of just looking at whether a line of an image passes through a center pixel, we decided to look at the 4 adjacent pixels around that center pixel. But because it's a little more complicated, it comes with a few rules. So one of the first rules is that to turn a pixel on, it has to have 2 directly across pixels, directly across the center pixel, that also the image of the line. However, if the pixels are not directly across from each other, we can remain it off. Lastly, if there are 3 or more pixels that also the line of the image passes through, we decide to keep it on. So we decided to put this to test, and again, we had the circle come in. And for a better clear example, as you can see, we kept that pixel on because the line of the circle passes through horizontally. And again, this passes through vertically. However, we kept this pixel off because the line of the image only passes to 2 adjacent pixels which are not directly across each other. As you can see, it kind of worked out well because the circle barely passes through that center pixel. So I may ask, do you think this worked out well or not so well?
Not so well.
Right. Because this algorithm only works when with extreme slopes of the circle, so when it's really great or when it's really low.
Alright, so obviously this algorithm was a little too selective, so we decided to change it up a little bit. The new one we went with we call our threshold algorithm. And what this basically said is that at least 1/8 of the pixel's area was enclosed by a curve, and that pixel will be turned on and become black, as you can see there. And if less than 1/8 of the pixel's area was enclosed by the curve, that pixel remained white and not turned on, as you can see here. So So although the line does go through, we decided not to turn the pixel on because we didn't feel that it pushed the pixel enough. So again, we're going to start with our basic 10 by 10 matrix and have our circle here. But the difference this time is on the inside, you're going to see 8 blocks pixels. These pixels are where the line goes through, but we didn't feel that encompass 1/8 of the area. Therefore, we left these pixels off. So when you see our actual turned on pixels, this looks a lot better than the past 2 algorithms. But the issue with this, it's still a little blocky and choppy, but it was our best out of the 3. So we decided we kind of utilize this to move forward and to actually trying to mathematically calculate our area.
So in order to mathematically calculate the area, so we wouldn't have to estimate it with our eyes, we looked to Green's theorem, which says that there's a relationship between the curves around the domain and the domain itself. So there are a few rules before we can use Green's theorem. The curves must all form a loop that's continuous, and the curves must all be oriented in the same direction. So in this case, they're all facing in the counterclockwise direction. And finally, the curves can't cross each other.
So here we're just going to introduce you to the basic formula that we use. And what this is the summation of integrals that we derive from Green's theorem. And what goes on inside is that we have the x component multiplied by the derivative of the y component, so on and so forth for all the curves we want to use. This is important to know going forward.
Now we're going to walk through a quick example with a 2 pixel by 2 pixel array. So we're going to define our x-axis to actually go vertically down and our y-axis to go over, so that we're dealing with rows and columns. And so if you turn your head sideways, things might make a little more sense with the points. So we want to find the area of this region, and some of you may be able to calculate it on your own, but we want to use our algorithms to try to calculate it. So we're going to try to make some curves. So looking at this curve, we have cosine of t plus 1, comma sine of t plus 1, where t goes between pi over 2 and pi. And then we have this vertical curve, which goes from the point 0, 1 to 1, 1. And finally, this horizontal curve, which goes from 1, 1 to 1, 2. And this fits the criteria for Green's theorem because the 3 curves are oriented in the same direction. It forms a continuous loop, and the curves don't cross each other.
All right, so now we've been introduced to the formula and the 3 curves that Pavan just mentioned that we want to plug in and find the area. So here's the actual mathematical steps. We're not going to go through them step by step. But pretty much we were trying to solve for that area before the circle. So does anyone think they know what that area was? Correct. Not very hard to use your unit circle, but we wanted to make sure of this with our formula, so we could use this as a basic going forward when we want to move into more complicated complex curves.
So the immediate consequence of using Green's theorem is that now we know the exact area of the closed up curve. 79%, so we clearly shade it using our 1/8 algorithm. But more importantly, now that we know the exact area, we can perhaps apply it to more complex algorithms where perhaps we could shade a lighter color to encompass less of the area, and a greater color as the area increase and create a gradient.
Now we're going to talk about how we can generate larger and larger circles with code, but we're not going to talk about code because we don't want to. We're going to talk about the mathematics. So first we need to start by defining a surface. So we're going to use a parametric vector function of 2 variables where our x component is r cosine of t and our y component is r sine of t. You may recognize this as the equations for a circle of radius r. So for this specific example, we want r to go between 1 and 4 and 0 to 2 pi. This is kind of like taking an infinite number of circles with radii between 1 and 4 and stacking them on top of each other. However, we can't use an infinite number of circles, so we're going to use 200, which is pretty close. And we need to iterate through values of t. So it goes between 0 and 2 pi, and also values of r, so it goes between 1 and 4. So we made t a function of I, so where I goes between 1 and 200, and r a function of j, where j goes from 1 to 10. So now we're going to go through a little example here, when I is equal to 1 and j is equal to 1. So using the 2 equations at the bottom, what value of t should we get when I is equal to 1? Anyone? 5 or 100, good. And what value of r should we get when j is 1? 13 over 10, yeah. So now we have a value of t and a value of r. We can smash that into our equation on the top, r cosine t, r sine of t, and we can calculate that to a decimal, 1.3, comma 0. And now we know that that point is part of our disk, and we can shade that in with the desired color.
So here we have 2 disks that were created using the algorithm. the Pavan just described. And we use the same amount of subintervals on each side, which means we use the same amount of circles and iterations that we went through on each side. But the key difference between the two is the width. The one on the left is a width of 2 pixels, while the one on the right is a width of 800 pixels. And you can see clearly from the one on the right that there's unnecessary white space in between. Well, we'd like that to be a solid disk instead. But furthermore, on the left, we have a redundant algorithm where it's just going over and over the same pixels. And so in order to make accurately make these disks and to decrease our processing time, we made the number of subintervals a function of the radii, so that we made disks that didn't have any of this white space, but also were made in the most efficient fashion. And that's how we made the disks in the next slide.
So in the past, we were actually manually inputting our algorithms to construct bitmap images, but now that we created a code, we can generate high resolution images. And as we did that, we actually noticed a trend. So as you can see, as we increase the resolution, the curvature of the circle actually becomes much more smoother. But there's also an issue with this. As you increase image resolution, you also increase the size of the file. My iPhone's only 16 gigabytes.
Okay, so up until now, we've only used 2 colors, black and white. So we thought it would be great if we could add in the other 16,777,214 colors to completely be able to use our other algorithms of blurring and gradient techniques. So the reason why we have so many possible colors is because each image, or each pixel rather, color is determined by a vector of RGB values, with RGB standing for red, green, and blue. These values have 256 possibilities, ranging from 0 to 255. And it's by varying these values we can get unique combinations that we know as colors. So we get green 255 plus blue 255, which is the cyan color on the top. You can see the other ones for yourself how when we add these different shades together, we get these dynamic combinations that we'll use in the algorithms. It's also important to note that for the purpose of our coding and to make it easier to process these numbers, we actually convert them into hexadecimal so that we can use them as integers, integer arrays, and we wouldn't have to deal with the cumbersome structure of the vectors, but simply be able to process through and quickly convert the colors of our various pixels.
So after understanding RGB values, we thought what's a better place to start than the rainbow. So as you can see, there's the basic RGB values for each color and the hexadecimal system. And what we want to do is try actually blurring this color strip.
Just like you said, we didn't want to just look at color, we want to actually manipulate and do something to it. So what we did, again, we got our RGB vectors for all the colors, and we use red and orange as just an example for you to visualize. And what we did is we averaged all 3 components so you get kind of a middle color, which will appear here, and we did this between all of them to find kind of that middle man. And then again, we wanted to get even closer together and blur that inside space. So we took that new middle color and averaged it with the 2 colors on the outside of it for individually, and therefore created that kind of blurred rainbow, which looks a lot better than our block rainbow. And this is very basic and simple. We needed kind of a stepping stone to get out of color and blurring and kind of move along and get more complex.
Okay, so the last component we needed before we could fully implement these color algorithms was alpha. It was actually another channel in addition to the RGB I already described. And alpha has to deal with opacity. So opacity is basically how much light we're going to allow through something. So if you'll refer to the graphic there on the right, an alpha value of 255, its maximum value, is going to denote a situation in which no light can penetrate. We get that solid red color. While an alpha value of 0, obviously its minimum value is going to denote complete transparency, and you just see our blue background. And so the reason we need this is because if we want to overlay, we want to put things on top of each other, we're going to have to make one slightly transparent to a varying degree in order to get this complete blur effect. And so this presented the problem of how we're going to add 2 vectors together that have varying alpha values. You can see in the example given, the one on the right has a half transparency, while the one on the left has full opacity.
So imagine, if you will, I have a solid red sheet of paper here, which represents the base color of kind of red. And then we have a kind of translucent glass that's kind of blue. So if I put the blue glass on top of the red paper, you get like some new color. But if I put the glass behind the paper, then all you would see is the paper. So how are we going to find the final color? So I have pixel A here, which is kind of red, and pixel B, which is a semi-transparent blue. And I'm going to start by defining a few constants. So case of A will be the alpha channel of pixel A divided by 255. And in case of B will be the alpha channel of pixel B divided by 255. And since 255 is our maximum value, case of A and case of B are just numbers between 0 and 1. So to find our final red channel, we're going to take our bottom layer, pixel A, and add it to K times the difference between pixel B and A. So if pixel B had 0 alpha, if it was completely transparent, then we'd be doing A plus 0 times the difference, which is just A, which makes sense. However, if the top pixel B was 100% opaque, then it'd be doing A plus B minus A, which is B. So this works for the red, green, and blue channels. However, for the final alpha channel, you have to do something a little bit trickier. We're going to take our K values, which represent how much light is blocked, and subtract 1 from each of those to get how much light is going through the pixel. And then multiply those together to get our final amount of light getting through. And then we're going to subtract that from 1 to get our final amount blocked, and then scale that up by 255 to get our final alpha value.
So after discovering alpha, we actually wanted to input it into our blurring algorithm. And the way we did this is actually very similar to how we blurred the rainbow. But instead of just using color blocks, we actually used a 3x3 array of two-dimensional pixels. And so what we did is we took all channels and added them together. So there's 9 of them here, but when we look at one pixel, we actually counted it twice to keep some of its same elements and not blur it too much. So when we did this for each pixel, you can see the result here. It may be a little bit difficult, but the center pixels are actually kept white. The adjacent pixels are actually a little bit lighter blue, and then the outer corners are a little darker blue. So this is just a simple example with a 3x3 array. But when we apply this to much larger images, it actually works out really well.
So here we have 2 images. They may look very similar, but they're actually not. We have a blurred disk on the right and a non-blurred disk on the left. And the reason we only blurred the disk was so that we wanted to keep the squares nice and crisp. But we wanted to have a nice fade from the circle to the blue background. So if we zoom in a little bit, we can start to see the stair-step pattern, the jagged edges, while on the right it still looks kind of smooth. If we zoom in even more, it becomes even more apparent what is happening. And the final result is a better image without sacrificing going to higher resolutions.
So after everything we did with the algorithms and theorems, we actually created one final image with putting everything together. While it may look a little simple here, we actually used our programming and to actually create it all at once. So as you can see, the transparency of the clouds, the sun is actually a hollow disk with intervals skipping between R and T. And then the 2 hills are actually different RGB value circles overlapping each other. But because the whole project is about anti-aliasing, we didn't want to stop there. So we added a little bit more blur to it, and as you can see, the clouds are much a little foggier, and the rays of the sun are actually more vibrant. But if we actually zoomed into the tri-section between the 2 hills and the sun, you would see the same smooth transition from color to color.
So just to conclude, we were really proud of the work we did. We feel like we made a lot of new discoveries, but research is always continuing. And we felt like we just kind of hit the ground running, but ran into some time restrictions. So we've had that possible extra time. We'd like to maybe discover some more intricate algorithms, specifically related to color, as well as dive into other areas of image editing, such as sharpening, contrasting, exposure, as well as work with creating more complex shapes and programming.